Marshall, welcome back, and I know you've got some information you want to share, and we're looking forward to learning. So, by all means.
All right. Well, there is a lot to do since the last time we talked. We've released 3 videos in our Planet X 101 series, and you can see that at yowza.com, YOWUSA.com, and we have the ones we've brought up are Deep Impact, Nibiru Nearing, and Pole Shift. And just real briefly, Deep Impact, we were doing the AMS meteor data, and the trends there are not looking good. If the trends continue, we could very well have a deep impact event that would swamp a coastline. If the trends do not reverse quickly. Nibiru Nearing is the one that seems to really have hit a nerve with the elites. Excuse me. We have several observations, including several from Turrialba, you know, that webcam we've been tracking in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. And in response to our program, which went up on June 8th, the U.S. government had the camera tilted down into the dirt, so it's no longer usable. So what they've done is they've stopped the making that webcam or that surveillance camera available for viewing. And if you go to my webpage at YOWUSA.com, you can see the Planet X 101 series, all 4 programs. It's about 3 hours. And for those of you who are newbies, it distills what would be the equivalent of 3 years of personal research effort into 3 hours. So this is a really fast and friendly way to bootstrap yourself into the topic. But also when you're there, read our article, It's Time to Look Up. And in that article, I document blow by blow. But this is smoking gun proof of suppression on the topic.
Yeah, and Marshall, if you remember correctly, after the last time you were on, I had to email you to let you know that, you know, not that I'm anybody special or important, but I, you know, double check stuff. I took like timestamps from your video and I went and looked, and I could account for everything except for that object. And so
yeah, that is, you know, and then I get people saying, well, it's a reflection on this and it's a reflection on that. Well, in previous videos, we have shown the object slipping behind the cloud banks. So tell me if a reflection can do that. I don't think so.
Yeah. Peter?
So.
I'm here. Sorry, I was just listening.
Oh,
I had
sorry.
watched the videos earlier, and you know, Marshall, I have to say, I've been interviewing you personally for about 3 years, and I've noticed over that period of time, at least 3 years, and over that period of time, you've continued to refine your work and provide more accurate data. And now, you know, I'm thinking, okay, sooner or later, this is going to have to show up. I was not a big, and I'm still not quite a big fan of Nibiru, but for different reasons now. But I wasn't, you know, based on Zechariah Stitchin's work, I was not a big fan of Nibiru. I said, hey, we're crossing the galactic plane, and I can see Earth evidence of this. However, you know, we watched Elenin come in and go out, and that wasn't Nibiru. And we watched Ison come in and go out, and you know that was supposed to be everything from the motherships in Nibiru. And no, it's not time yet. And I knew these things based on the prophecies, based on the timing that's laid out in the prophecies. However, when I'm listening to this data here that you're presenting, and I'm looking at the timeline of my data in the prophecies, I'm saying, uh-oh, heads up.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that is, whichever way you cut it, we're in deep poodoo, you know.
We are.
Yeah, and it's the timing of the events, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but it's the timing of the events with the blood tetrad moons that started in April on Passover, and they're going to end on the Festival of Booths, which is Sukkot, September 28th, 2015. Interestingly enough, the next Passover has been miscalculated. it's on the calendar as April 22nd, when indeed, when you do the calculations as prescribed, it should be March 23rd. Interesting. It may come at a time when you think not.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I don't think you'll
I'm
mistake
looking at
it.
these things and what you're saying, and I'm saying, okay, well, maybe we should pay attention to what Marshall has to say.
Yeah. You know, I find the denial factor is just amazing to me. You know, if you create a Google search string, end times, Bible, and deception, okay? You plug that, you know, end times plus Bible plus deception. You put that into Google, and it comes up with like 1.63 million results. So people are used to talking about, well, yeah, there's going to be deception. 1.63 million results. I mean, stop and think about it. These are web pages that are hitting on these keywords in that sequence. And yet people still say, well, if it was that big, the government would have to tell us about it because it would be that big.
Yeah, and if you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn that's for sale. It's going cheap. It's going quick. To you, whoever wants to buy it, $300 million. You can put
There
a toll
you go.
booth on it, and we're good to go. You can make
Such
your
a
money
deal.
back in a year. I promise you. There's a lot of traffic that goes across that bridge.
And, you know, it's what I'm seeing is, you know, is just part and part of the suppression. What makes the suppression really so effective is that people really do tend to cling to the bliss of their ignorance like jealous lovers. They do not want to, they don't want the news. But there's a growing minority of them that do and that are waking up to it. And so that for me was the key issue here to creating the Planet X 101 series, which is about 3 hours of video and capped off with pole shift, which gets into a look at, you know, what would the celestial mechanics be in terms of the causality of a pole shift. And, you know, after you've watched this for 3 hours, you're going to see a lot of hard evidence. You're going to see a lot of observations. You're going to see a lot of science. You're also going to see other things. You're going to see prophecy, predictions. It pulls all of the interest angles in there. But at the end of it, if you've gone through the whole 4 episodes in the series, which takes about 3 hours, you'll have consolidated 3 years of personal research. And at that point, you're going to have a really strong mastery of the topic. And the reason why I'm doing that for the newbies is I really want them to jumpstart and to be able to get into it, because they do not have the benefit of time that people have had in the past to contemplate all of this. They really need to get rocking and rolling much faster. And so for that reason, I've got myself working on a dual track where I need to work with the newbies, which is why I do this series, but my greater emphasis right now is to begin helping people who are going to who've already committed to surviving this.
Let me ask
and to
you.
get through it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Marshall. No, you could finish up.
Oh, that was it.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you. I'd like for you to one more time go over why it's not a lens flare. And I'm not questioning you. I'm just saying for those who keep trying to, you know, point out and say, oh, it's a lens flare. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, you know, because lens flare, sundog, these have become knee-jerk denial rejections.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the video, really, and look at the pictures or the evidence that Marshall presents, or the videos, actually.
Right.
You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Yeah.
It is. And, you know, the thing of it that I find a little frustrating is people who say this, or people who, you know, I say, well, have you followed my work? Have you watched my videos? Have you seen everything we've presented? And, you know, it's no. But it's a sundog. But you haven't looked at my work. No, it's a sundog. And you're not going to look at my work. No, I'm not going to waste my time looking at your work. And I mean, it's this, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But, you know, when we started looking at this, of course that's going to happen. Now, I've been in this game since 1999. That's when I wrote my first articles in this field. And it was in about 2003 that I started seeing a real heavy disinformation effort by the operatives being planted with these sundog cell phone pictures. And this was in the days when you had the early camera phones that had, you know, like 1 to 2 megapixel cameras. 2 megapixels was woo. And these cameras had really primitive circuitry compared to what we have now. And so all they had to do is just take it, name it at the sun, and shake it back and forth. And they could get it to do all kinds of stupid things and create halos and reflections and sundogs.
You know, and Marshall, I just want to say one thing here. What you're pointing out here is extremely important. At one time, I had my own photography business, and I used Hasselblad and Rolleiflex. There was a reason. There's a reason why I used those cameras.
Rolleiflex. Good Lord, man, you had the good stuff.
Yeah, and for the, if I really wanted to expand the film, I had a Maya RB67, and that's it. I'm dealing with a piece of film which is 3 inches by almost 4 inches, and I would use ultrafine grain so I could turn around and take that picture and blow it up to a 3 by 4 photograph, 3 foot by 4 foot photograph, and it would look crisp and clear. So having and with the circuitry, when they I love digital cameras. Big frustration with digital cameras now that they're getting up into the 40 megapixel range. Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah, but still,
you're dealing with circuitry and
still
the camera's
dealing with
brain.
circuitry and batteries. And I got to be honest with you, you know, when I've gone out on certain shoots, I still have a good old 35 millimeter Olympus, and I'll go buy film and use it because click, you know, you got it, click. And with these digital cameras, it's click. And it just takes forever for them to image. They just don't have the speed unless you're going to go out and buy these really expensive ones. But then you run out of batteries. Then you run out of chips. I mean, the old Olympus, I just get a bag of film and maybe a couple extra batteries, and I'm good to go for a trip. And so it's getting there. But the big thing that we're really finding right now people are using for observations are smartphones. And here's what really made a huge shift in the disinformation effort, because back when the cell phones were 1 to 2 megapixels, you could get all of these aberrations. And so they just started flooding the internet with this nonsense, all right? And we were watching it. We've documented it. You can find it on our site. You know, we were, documenting what was happening years ago. Not that anyone is ever interested in history. And however, things changed in a very pronounced way when Apple brought out the first of the iPhones. I think back then it was about, 8 megapixel was the camera, but it just simply, the iPhone set a whole new standard. And at that point, what we saw was that the disinformationalists stopped the campaign. But they had already achieved their goals. They had gotten the terms reflections and sundogs injected into the public domain. And consequently, when people would look at pictures coming off of smartphones, they would brand them as sundogs just as fast as they would coming off of these junky little phones, which we won't even use images that come in from those phones. They're just very problematic. But the smartphones, now you're talking 10, 12 megapixels and more. I've got a Galaxy S4 active, and my God, the picture resolution is amazing. And so once those came in, the disinformation campaign chilled out, but the damage was already done. And so people were already inoculated against these kind of images. And the thing is, with a smartphone, you can get reflections and sundogs in an image, but you can also, unlike with the cheap cameras or the older cameras, which were very poor, you can differentiate between a legitimate object and some sort of aberration, reflection, or sundog. And so you can make those distinctions in a better resolution camera. And so, you still have this thing where people jump to it. Now, when we started tracking Turrialba, all right, and this is 3 different camera systems, and one was a standard definition, one was high definition, and the current one, which was gifted by the United States government, is about as clear as mud. And however, we've acquired Nibiru with all three. But what's
and
more
this is the
important
volcano
is
that you're
right,
talking about.
yeah.
Correct?
But the point here is, and we've already put it in one of our past videos, all right, is that we have images of Nibiru slipping behind a cloud bank. Now, Peter, you were a professional photographer. How does a reflection or sundog or a lens aberration slip behind a cloud bank?
It doesn't. When the sun, whenever that bright object goes behind the sun or clouds, that flare should go away. As a matter of fact, my favorite day to shoot, especially outdoors, was on overcast days. No sun, no haze. You don't have to worry about any kind of lens flare being in the way. And with a little touch of light, hey, you had your own sun.
Yeah, but the point is that if you have a lens flare, all right, the lens flare is just going to stay there. It's an aberration. It'll appear in front of a cloud as all right. But if it's a natural object, it will, in other words, if it's a lens flare, it's between you and whatever you're imaging.
Correct.
If it's a natural object, all right, then it's a natural object, and then it can be obscured.
Oh, sure. And so, when it goes behind the cloud, that's pretty much it. You're not going to see. It should go completely away. You know, depending on what's causing that lens flare.
It goes away because it is obscured. But if it is a lens flare is an aberration that happens in front of what you're shooting. It's between you and the target. Exactly. That's where lens flares occur, is between you and between what you're shooting. So
and they should be off to the side, typically.
Well, the lens flare is just going to stay there until you shift the camera view, you do something different, you do something dramatic. All right. So the point here is we went through and we did a lot of work. I mean, God, we spent weeks on this stuff, reviewing the images, because we knew there would be this knee-jerk nonsense coming out. But also as researchers, we didn't want to go down a rabbit hole. So we want to make sure, first off, is this a reflection, a lens aberration, a flare of some sort? No. Okay, when we did our deep analysis on it, no. Were there flares, were there sun flares and other aberrations occurring? Yes, but because we had high-resolution imagery, you can sort between the two. Then we knew we had a natural object. Now, one of the things that we do is called a gamma test. That is the easiest way. Gamma is a way of adjusting your images in a digital format. It's not for film. Gamma is digital. It's desktop publishing. And so if you have a reflection, reflections are what we call cold objects. All right, so you turn the gamma down to 0, you'll always see the sun. But your reflections or your sundogs will disappear because they're cold images. They're not generating their own light. These are reflections of light that is already existing in the environment. So because the light has been bent through the distortion, it's not going to have the same heat, if you will. It's not going to be hot. It's going to be cold. And that is the principal way we use gamma for the test. And so when we look at it, you pull the gamma down to 0, and if that object is still there, then you know that that object is generating light, because the only thing that'll go to 0 gamma is something that's generating light. All right, we do that, but also we go and we look at feathering. All right, if you have reflections and you do an intense close-up, you go down to the pixel level. Now, this is the reason why you need to have the high resolution. Because with high resolution, you can really zoom in on this, especially when if you have original source files.
This gives you one big advantage with the digital camera that you're not going to have with a film camera. Because you'd have to be looking at the raw negatives under a loop to actually look at what grains of silver were exposed.
Yeah, that's really it. And the thing about it with digital is when you get the raw image file, you're essentially doing the same thing. You can really go down. And that's when we're looking for, the other thing besides gamma is we're looking for edge definition. All right, and an object that's generating its own light is going to have a crisper edge when you really zoom down on it. And a reflection is not. A reflection is always going to have a soft edge. So are sundogs. So these are the kind of things that we do when we're evaluating these images. And you know, I'm just not going to be buffaloed by a bunch of disinformation operatives who have just gone out and tainted, you know, the discussion with, you know, they do that. Like now the current thing is, you know, before sundog, 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 you know, and everybody says it because they think, oh, well, it makes me sound intelligent. Okay, good. All right. And they really don't understand, you know, to the level that we do. Now the new term after sundogs that the disinformationalists have created is fear porn. Okay? And so these are code words. These become code words. This is social programming. And when you hear these code words, the immediate emotional message people get is, don't look at this. Don't look at this. Don't look at this. All right? And that's how it works. And it's effective because people want it to be effective.
We've got to take a break, guys. So we'll pick right back up on this. I do want to ask you this quick before the break. Didn't the clouds? I mean, they played a significant role in showing that it wasn't a lens flare, too. Did they not? If I remember correctly.
If the object disappears behind the cloud, all right, then you know that that object is behind the cloud, and a lens flare is going to be between you and the cloud. Mm-hmm. Lens flares live directly right in front of the camera, all right? Real natural objects are wherever they are in front of the camera. And that means if that object is slipping behind a cloud bank, that means that object is in space and it is behind the cloud. And that's the reason why it slips behind the cloud bank.
Yeah, your lens flare could actually, is most likely right within the lens itself.
Yeah, a lot of these are, you know, this is going to be within the lens. If you have a surveillance camera, it has a housing. The housing will have a glass that's protecting the lens, so you can get an interaction between the lens and the camera and the surveillance housing, you know, protective filter that's in front of it. But, you know, in the final analysis, whether it's sundogs, reflections, or whatever, it's all going to take place within an inch or two of the imaging circuitry. All right. Whatever's existing in the environment is whatever's going to be in the environment. And in the case of Turrialba, we're looking at infinity as the setting. So, you know, we're shooting the other side of a volcano. Behind that is going to be cloud banks. Behind the cloud banks is going to be the sun and whatever objects are visible. And then, of course, once we've determined that it's a natural object, the next thing we have to do is it a cataloged object? You know, and this is the other thing. I mean, we always hear that they go Venus, 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 Venus.
And I was able to account.
Hey, you know what? You right there in what we're showing you, you have the direction, you have the time of day, you have the location. Go get stellarium and check for yourself. Do they ever do it? No, because they like sounding intelligent by going Venus, 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 Venus. If they would look, they would see it's not a cataloged object.
All right.
You already did that, right?
Michael did, yes. Marshall, when we come back from the break, I want to ask you about Antarctica.
All right. Okay. Peter, take us into the break while you're there.
Folks, stay with us. After the break, we'll be going to Antarctica.
We'll be back, everyone. It's going to be a bad luck day, but I'll tell you, why do I always feel so good on Friday the 13th? That might be bad.
It's a full moon besides.
Oh.
This is going to happen for like another 80 years or something like that. I forgot exactly what it was. But, you know, I get a kick out of it. I always like Friday the 13th. It's like, okay, you know, let's stare destiny in the face. And especially on a full moon. But you know where Friday the 13th got its unlucky aura from?
I don't know.
It was
Knights Templars.
Yes, it was Friday the 13th that they started rounding up Knights Templar and officially ended the order. Or at least those who were running the order anyway.
See, and Friday the 13th has never been a bad luck day for me. I've never had a Friday the 13th that I could look back on and say, oh, my God, I'm not getting out of bed today. They've always been pretty good, so I don't know.
I agree with you. It's like, hey, today's Friday the 13th. Cool. Let's go live life.
Yeah. Good night to drink and watch some scary movies, right?
Speaking of which, you know, Marshall, I've been watching Antarctica for at least 2 or 3 years. You know, it's right on my main feed here. It's the second new MORE station that I've been watching. Their essential live, semi-live snapshot feed of the station and the horizon. And I've watched the sun rise lots of times, and I've watched the moon rise lots of times, and I've seen some things I can't explain. Now, some can be explained by, quote, lens flares. As a matter of fact, the first time I looked at something, I go, wait a minute, what in the world is going on here? What am I actually seeing? But I've seen some things which can't be explained by lens flares, and there's one that's going on now. But here's the interesting thing. You brought up the volcano, where they swapped out the camera, and the image turned to garbage. Well, the camera that they had at New MORE Station was a pretty good camera. It showed everything. It had, oh wow, the Aurora Borealis, or I guess it's down there. It's what is it, the Aurora Antialis, or whatever the heck it is. Down, it's called something differently down there. The Southern Lights, the equal thereof. Beautiful. You'd see it right in color some nights. The sky would just light up green and different shades, and you can watch the shimmer as you watch the still photo. Changed out the camera. Now it looks like you have an old black and white TV that you turn around and you're in between channels, or you're on a channel that's not transmitting and you got nothing but snow coming across. As a matter of fact, it was so bad that they actually put in a little sub-screen camera next to it so you could still see that the station was there without the snow. Now, they have improved the resolution of it a little bit, but boy, not like it used to be. Now, the interesting thing is that I've been watching something rise almost every morning for at least a year that I've been writing off as Venus. I'm not an astronomer. I'm not going to go run down and educate myself in something that I barely know to go find information that doesn't really affect my life today, of something that I already know is coming. And I've got a man that is dedicated to understanding it, and his information is right at my fingertips. So, seeing as you're here,
Yeah.
do you keep track of what's going on? How closely do you follow what's going on in Antarctica?
I'm always getting stuff, coming across the transom on that. And oftentimes we find it is a cataloged object. And so you don't get anything. In terms of the resolution being changed, I mean, that's obvious. Instead of going in and mucking with the camera feeds, because things do sometimes fall through the cracks, it's just easier, to replace high definition cameras with clear as mud cameras. I mean, I think literally they had to go and get some of the original cameras that were used to film the Kennedy-Nixon debate. Yeah,
it almost seems that way. It's like,
they just look awful. That's what they did, with Turrialba. The first two systems were put up by the university that operates it there in Costa Rica. And when the second system, which was a very nice high-definition system, when it was disabled during a volcanic eruption, and these things happen, it's a very active volcano, it's a very dangerous environment up there, and it's hard on the cameras. The thing about Turrialba that's very different from other volcano cams and surveillance cameras or webcams is that 99% of the other volcano cams are all pointed out to the east, because that's either they're pointed directly to the east or they're pointed right down into the mouth of the volcano. To the east, they want those really fabulous sunrise pictures in the morning, which are really fun to look at. With Turrialba, what they could only work from the eastern flank of the volcano. It was the only safe place where they could mount a camera looking out to the west-southwest. And the purpose of the volcano camera for Turrialba is actually, it's principally for the benefit of the people who live at the base of the volcano, because they get up in the morning and, they're not tuning into, Good Morning America. They're tuning into the volcano feed to see if they're going to need to bust a move that day. And so it's always had a very good field of view to show people what's happening in the volcano, particularly with a couple of events there. And the second camera, which was high definition, which was installed, I think, in late 2012, and that was the one that we did all our imaging on in 2013. We've got literally, we probably got over 1,000 captures of Nibiru from that camera system. And it was toasted, I believe it was in May of 2013. And then the feed went dark, came back, I believe, in July, and with a camera that was gifted to them by the United States government. And it was just the worst camera. It reminded me of those old 2-megapixel cell phone cameras. It just was that bad. It had a very wide focus, and it was installed with a peculiar tilt and a zoom. It was very difficult to use, and actually through the remainder of 2013, we would monitor it. We have team members who monitor it, and we just couldn't find anything useful. However, in January of this year, Nibiru is nearing, it is getting bigger, and so even with this highly distorted camera, we were able to acquire it and to observe it. And so that is what we reported in our video we published on June 8th, which is Nibiru nearing. And in that one, we actually do a detailed analysis, and I actually, in that video, go through January of 2010, and Nibiru was visible in 2010. Also, we have January of 2013, January of 2014. It gives us the same time of year for 3 different years and 3 completely different camera systems. And then what I do is I compensate for tilt and zoom, but also not only people are resonating with it. What happened was the United States government had a very nasty response to it. And what they did was they went to the operators of the feed in Costa Rica, and they had them do 2 things. One, post on the site a very detailed acknowledgement of who had gifted the camera. And then they had the camera pointed down and basically into the dirt. And so the lower 2/3 of the image is completely useless. It's the ground at the base of the camera, which there's nothing of value there to look at or to study. But what it does do is it denies you a view of the sky. And so their response to our video of June 8th was to make the feed completely unusable by perverting the image from the camera, which is completely inconsistent with anything that that university has been doing since 2010. All right? So this is something where it's very clearly a cover-up. We document and explain it. I published an article this morning. It's time to look up. And it really is. And you know, I get from people after we go through the cell phone sundog issues and all of that and all the, you know, all the usual yada yada from the disinformation programming, people say, well, okay, so why? Why should I care? Why should I care? And the reason why they should care and the reason why there is suppression is that you have to understand what the global elites, what their strategy is. You know, the people that throw all of these nonsense objections at me are not the wealthy people.
And I'd like to
the
just...
top 2% of the world, they got their bunkers. I'm telling you, you would have maybe only 1 out of 100 doesn't have a bunker.
Marshall,
or hasn't made arrangements to go into a taxpayer-funded bunker.
Go ahead, Michael, and then I want to make a comment.
Okay, I just wanted to say quickly where my interest came in this whole Planet X ordeal is back, and I just want to go through this quickly. Back in 1983, I went to John Marshall High School in Rochester, New York, and my science teacher was Mr. Freeman. So anybody wants to look that up and see if I'm telling the truth, you can look it up. And in that class, we would get once a week, they would give us a little like magazine type, real thin, few-page pamphlet from NASA, and it was part of our science. We were supposed to pick a story out of there we were interested in, do some research on it, and write about it. Well, I came across Planet X. NASA said they found it, and this was in this magazine. I remember going home. I was excited because in it they said there could be life and blah blah. You know, they said a few things about it, and you know, and I didn't think nothing of it. Years went by. I didn't hear no more about it. Then I started listening to Art Bell back in the 1990, and I heard it mentioned a few times, and it clicked in, and I remembered, and I says, hey, I remember reading about that, and since then I have been looking into it, and I've come across a lot of stuff that points towards it. I've seen a lot of bull crap that's come out about it. I have to say,
Yeah.
Marshall, you are the only one, and I am a hard person to convince. Anybody that listens to this show knows this. I'm hard about these things. But Marshall, you are the only one that has provided me with something that I could actually verify that is out there. Now, I could say I don't know exactly what it is. I wait for your data to find out if this thing's moved or where it is and blah, blah, blah. But it's there. It's, if in my opinion, I'm no professional, but I did what anybody could do. I took the coordinates. I looked on a star map. I found this object, and it wasn't Venus. It wasn't Saturn. It wasn't Jupiter. It wasn't any of those. It wasn't any of the moons, and it wasn't a lens flare. It's there. I don't know what it is. You do, but it's there. And so you have verified more to me than anybody ever has on this topic. And I'm not blowing smoke up your butt. I'm just saying. So that's where I'm coming from on this, so people understand. And Peter just lost his internet connection. Or did I? No, Peter did. And when he went down, he took everybody down. All right, so let me hang up here. Okay, hold on, folks. We got nailed here. All right, let me first get Marshall back on.
This is the general mailbox for your own world.
Well, that ain't gonna work. All right, let me first get Peter back on. Well, I don't know if his connection's come back yet. Peter was controlling the call, and he lost his connection. So when that happened, we lost everything. So we'll see if Peter gets back so he could comment. Let me try Marshall again. I'm just going to go back and forth here until I get one of them.
This is the general mailbox for
That's
your own.
not going to work. Wow, you sure it's not me that went down here? No, I'm still up. How about a little something in the chat there? Can everybody hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Anybody hearing me? LateNightInTheMidlands.com chat room. Can somebody give me a shout? Thank you, JH. All right, so I'm good. So this is Peter then. All right, so let me get him. Oh, there we go. All right.
Okay, well, looks like we peeved off.
Peter, you gotta hang up. You gotta hang up on Curtis, though, Peter. You brought us all back.
Well, Curtis, if you're with us, hang up yourself. Oh, wait, I might be able to do it from here.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Oh no, now you're calling him back. Oh boy.
Sorry.
All right. Here
sorry, we have thunderstorms here, and we just had I thought I was going to be down for the rest of the night, but it was the power went off and came back on. No, it was not the elite attacking us, although I do want to get into that subject.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I'm glad to hear it was thunder.
Well, I said what I had to say, Peter. So go ahead. I know you had a comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, help! I've been knocked off the air. Oh shucks, where was it? Go talk about having to reflect. Tell you what, why don't you folks carry on? I'll catch up.
Well, I was just talking about my interest, where my interest came in this subject, and that how Marshall Masters, you know, and I've been critical. Believe me, I've had a guy, and Marshall, you know him probably pretty well by now, King Don, who's in my chat, and him and I would argue back and forth, and I'd say yes, Marshall has some good information, but it hasn't been proven to me yet. And then finally, I saw that video. And I could honestly say you found something. So, you know, it's.
Let me say this. I forgot my original thought in the scurry to get back online, but that's okay. I will say this. I've listened to virtually everyone that is out there at one point or another. People say, have you listened to this person? And I was like, oh, geez, I listened to that person. They go back and look at the video. Yep, I've listened to what they've had to say. I've listened to what all of the I'll call them David Icke wannabes or whatever they are. I've listened to what they've all had to say, and none of them have an answer other than, oh, well, we're going to reach a higher dimension, and we're going to ascend, and we're going to experience a new life someplace else. Hey, that's called rapture, folks, which is not substantiated by the scriptures, by the way. The idea of the rapture came out of a large evangelical movement that happened back in the early 1800s. You'd be surprised how many religions are still around, which was started back in the 1800s. They just grew into something else. But that's where this whole idea of the rapture began. Before that, there was never any mention of a, quote, rapture. I'm not going to get into church to dogma. That's not why we're here. The interesting thing is, though, when you do look at the scriptures, and how it's laid out. I use it personally as a timeline. I have a long education in it. I've studied it all my life. I go back and reanalyze it. And I've listened to all of these people. And I've listened to the scientific end as best you can. I gathered a lot of information from Richard Hoagland, right up to his $33 attendance for his, Comet Elenin seminar. And I didn't pay the $33. It was eventually put out on YouTube, and I watched it for free. But I thought, boy, isn't that an interesting number? Isn't that telling? And eventually I stopped paying attention because what Richard was saying, now I did learn some things, but it wasn't what he was, when he would say something, it was like very esoteric, non-definitive. It was out there in the ether someplace, and you had to wait for more information. Stay tuned for drip, drip, drip. And so, you know, it's like, come on, give me a break. And then the trolls, whenever I would make a comment on his Facebook page, the trolls would come out. Oh, exactly, that's fear porn. I know it's not. It's a warning. I don't know how many times I've used this expression. If your house was on fire and your neighbor tried to wake you up, would you tell him, go away, it's fear porn, you're a fear monger?
Well, and I don't try to convince anybody of anything. All I'm doing is I'm trying to get truth. Once I confirm something and it's real to me, I'll then share it with others. And if they want to, you know, follow along and look into it, great. But a lot of times, and I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of times I find this on YouTube all the time. You got people trying to debunk that have never even, you know, I call them the parrot society. They repeat everything they hear. They don't want to do any research of their own. And I run into that quite often with people. And so,
and the more closed mind they are, the less likely they are to read anything other than the headline, make a comment based on ignorance. I got into a heated debate over a topic with that in a friend's restaurant one night, got up and walked off. You know, this gentleman pulled, I love this, he pulled his heritage. He said, well, my great-grandfather was a major in the Confederate War and in the Confederate Army. And I'm thinking, oh, so your family comes from a bunch of bigots, huh?
That was good. He must have stuck you with a check after that one.
Well, we weren't dining together. We just happened to be in proximity thereof as the conversation was going on. But I got so upset over the situation, I walked out without paying the bill.
Good, you stuck him. Great.
Well, it was my friend's restaurant. I stuck my friend. I wasn't had paid the bill later on, but I was so pissed at this person's ignorance. The fact that he would make a comment based on no information whatsoever to base the comment upon.
None. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, you go, they say, okay, I want to debate you on your evidence. Okay, fine. Have you studied it? No, but I want to debate you on your evidence.
And what you get, you know,
and it's like, have you looked at any of my videos? No, but I want to debate you on your evidence. You know, it's like, so what are you going to do? Just call me names? I mean, how this is going to help? But, you know, guys, this behavior is all, it has nothing to do with Planet X. It has everything to do with social programming. Social programming is very powerful. Let me explain to you how this works, because this is important to understand why these people just do these idiotic things. Is that, first off, we are talking about a topic that provokes a deep racial memory that is in our memory engrams from birth, of rocks falling out of the sky and killing a heck of a lot of people. And so it is a terrifying thought for us. It just immediately evokes terror. And awareness, when you come into awareness in this topic, like I often say, it's like getting hit in the face with a dead salmon. You're just spitting scales for a while and wondering what the hell happened to you. And so what happens after your racial memory of a space threat is provoked, you're having an incredibly powerful, fearful, emotional response, which is then immediately channeled through social programming. You know, social programming comes, if we were in North Korea, you know, well, yes, everyone's in lockstep for the great leader. Okay, we know who's doing the social programming. Here, it's every bit just as powerful, but it's more subtle. And the social programming has a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid are the central bankers. And then they're the ones telling the corporations what the message is. Then the corporations are telling the governments that are in service to the corporations what the message is. And then it finally filters down to the people we rely on for advice, our doctors and our ministers and our parents and so forth. And finally, there we are at the, you know, the bottom end of the triangle. And
might I add, this is also somewhat of a game of telephone. So the message at the top either becomes amplified or distorted by the time it hits the bottom. But what it all comes down to is that we're controlled, and we're never ever told the truth.
We're never told the truth. And here's the thing of it is, you can ask everyone, does social programming exist? And everyone will look you straight in the face and say, absolutely, social programming, there's no question about it, it exists. And then right after they say that, they're going to look at you and they're going to say the same thing that every alcoholic who is in denial will tell you. But I can control it. All right? And alcoholics will say, I can control it, and I can control it, and they'll do that until finally they've destroyed their life, and gosh knows how many other lives, and they show up one night at an AA meeting, and they stand up and they go, I'm so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. But they've got to really wreck their lives in order to get to that point. And with social programming, it's the same thing. Everyone it's a given. There's no hidden fact about it. But what people don't understand is that they embrace it like alcoholics embrace the bottle. Right?
Let's take a look at this. And it doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be a number of things.
Anything. And it really boils down to people just cling to the bliss of their ignorance like jealous lovers. Now, the folks that don't do that, huh?
Who's Dancing with the Stars?
Yeah, who's there? You know, it's like, you know, what's Beyonce doing today? And that's the reason why that's all you see on CNN.
Who's on
so
first?
People, they want the distraction. They don't want to deal with the long-term threats. Now, people who have money, the top 2%, if someone's in the top 2% and they don't already have a bunker, and I'm talking about $500,000 is like entry level for these folks. If they don't have one of these things, and typically they're multi-million-dollar bunkers, they are a real oddball in their social caste. These people do not sit here and go with the cell phone sundog, all these fear porn, all of these disinformation mantras, and you know, attacking anybody that's trying to present information. They are like sponges. They soak it up because they understand risk. They understand you take risk, you mitigate it, you evaluate it, you protect against it. But in the final analysis, you're always looking down the road to say, okay, what could adversely affect my position? And you plan for dealing with that, which is no different than every military in the world does war games for every possible contingency, including alien invasions. All right? People who work with risk are the ones that look at this. I call them the perceptives. They look at it rationally, and they move forward in a very rational manner, and they do some very impressive stuff. The people who do not work in risk, the ones that want a paycheck because they don't want uncertainty in their lives, these are the ones that are going, oh boy, rocks falling from space. Oh, I'm going to channel this through my social programming. Obviously, if you're talking about something that is not about being a good consumer, then you're one of those, all right? And you get mocked and humiliated. And you can, it's really easy to tell when people are in this knee-jerk social programming response mode because they're completely irrational. I see this with folks that are coming into awareness and have had dreams, visions, and premonitions. And unfortunately, only 1 in 5 couples are you going to see where both husband and wife are in awareness together. And when they do, these are incredibly happy people. Just incredibly happy people, and they're busy researching and preparing and planning, and they've got control over their lives. And they are, what's really important is once you are in awareness, you are really free of the social programming. You are marching to the beat of a different drummer, all right? And you're being punished for it. You know, you're off everyone's Christmas card lists and so forth. But you're walking humbly with your God, and it opens up your life to a whole new dimension. That's amazing. You go through what the mystics call a Kundalini ascension, and you become really spiritual. You get much more connected to the cosmic consciousness, God, Yahweh, whatever you want to call it. But your sense of connection, your sense of purpose, and how the universe is unfolding really expands in ways that are nurturing and fulfilling. And for the people who are the fear babies that are still stuck in their social programming with these knee-jerk reactions, they can't relate to it. And what I see with these couples is that one in awareness will tell the other, honey, just please look at this mountain of evidence I've accumulated. And the spouse, who's a spoiler spouse, is going to go, no, it's all stupid. I don't want to look at it. Never going to happen. But just look at a few things. No, it's all stupid. You're stupid. And if you don't do it, I'm going to divorce you. And see what happens. That's it. It gets into these really, really nasty threats, bad behaviors, name calling, mockery, humiliation. And you know, the interesting thing is I have never seen someone in awareness who is married to a spoiler spouse. Never do I see them say, well, you're as dumb as a sack of hammers. I'm going to divorce you. Never. They're always as loving as possible. They always bend backwards. They always turn the other cheek. It's the other spouse that immediately goes on the warpath with, if you don't stop this awareness crud, I'm going to divorce you. Okay?
And the hammer. You'll burn in hell.
You'll burn in hell. And the interesting thing is about once that threat is laid down, the spoiler spouse, then they're back, they've hit the nuclear button. Okay? Now it's a winner-take-all kind of situation. And in 1 out of 10 cases, I see that the spoiler spouse will divorce the person in awareness. But in the final analysis, 9 times out of 10, it's the person in awareness that winds up divorcing the spoiler spouse, if for no other reason than you're just tired of dealing with all the negativity they're injecting into your life, and you just want some peace and quiet.
Absolutely. Marshall, welcome back. And I know you've got some information you want to share, and we're looking forward to learning. So by all means.
All right. Well, there is a lot to do since the last time we talked. We've released 3 videos in our Planet X 101 series, and you can see that at yowza.com, YOWUSA.com. And we have the ones we've brought up are Deep Impact, Nibiru Nearing, and Pole Shift. And just real briefly, Deep Impact, we were doing the AMS meteor data, and the trends there are not looking good. If the trends continue, we could very well have a deep impact event that would swamp a coastline. If the trends, that is, if the trends do not reverse quickly. Nibiru Nearing is the one that seems to really have hit a nerve with the elites. Excuse me. We have several observations, including several from Turrialba, you know, that webcam we've been tracking in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. And in response to our program, which went up on June 8th, the U.S. government had the camera tilted down into the dirt, so it's no longer usable. So what they've done is they've stopped the making that webcam or that surveillance camera available for viewing. And if you go to my webpage at YOWUSA.com, you can see the Planet X 101 series, all 4 programs. It's about 3 hours. And for those of you who are newbies, it distills what would be the equivalent of 3 years of personal research effort into 3 hours. So this is a really fast and friendly way to bootstrap yourself into the topic. But also when you're there, read our article, It's Time to Look Up. And in that article, I document blow by blow, but this is smoking gun proof of suppression on the topic.
Yeah, and Marshall, if you remember correctly, after the last time you were on, I had to email you to let you know that, you know, not that I'm anybody special or important, but I, you know, double check stuff. I took like timestamps from your video and I went and looked, and I could account for everything except for that object. And so
yeah, that is, you know, and then I get people saying, well, it's a reflection on this and it's a reflection on that. Well, in previous videos, we have shown the object slipping behind the cloud bank. So tell me if a reflection can do that. I don't think so.
Yeah. Peter?
So
I'm here. Sorry, I was just listening.
Oh,
I
I'm
had
sorry.
watched the videos earlier, and you know, Marshall, I have to say, I've been interviewing you personally for about 3 years, and I've noticed over that period of time, at least 3 years, and over that period of time, you've continued to refine your work and provide more accurate data. And now, you know, I'm thinking, okay, sooner or later, this is going to have to show up. I was not a big fan, and I'm still not quite a big fan of Nibiru, but for different reasons now. But I wasn't, you know, based on Zechariah Stitchin's work, I was not a big fan of Nibiru. I said, hey, we're crossing the galactic plane, and I can see Earth evidence of this. However, you know, we watched Elenin come in and go out, and that wasn't Nibiru. And we watched Ison come in and go out, and you know that was supposed to be everything from the motherships in Nibiru. And no, it's not time yet. And I knew these things based on the prophecies, based on the timing that's laid out in the prophecies. However, when I'm listening to this data here that you're presenting, and I'm looking at the timeline of my data in the prophecies, I'm saying, uh-oh, heads up.
yeah, you know, I mean, that is, whichever way you cut it, we're in deep poodoo, you know.
We are.
Yeah, and it's the timing of the events, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but it's the timing of the events with the blood tetrad moons that started in April on Passover, and they're going to end on the Festival of Booths, which is September 28th, 2015. Interestingly enough, the next Passover has been miscalculated. It's on the calendar as April 22nd, when indeed, when you do the calculations as prescribed, it should be March 23rd. Interesting. It may come at a time when you think not.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I don't think you'll
I'm
mistake
looking at
it.
these things and what you're saying, and I'm saying, okay, well, maybe we should pay attention to what Marshall has to say.
Yeah, you know, I find the denial factor is just amazing to me. You know, if you create a Google search string, end times, Bible, and deception, okay? You plug that, you know, end times plus Bible plus deception. You put that into Google, and it comes up with like 1.63 million results. So people are used to talking about, well, yeah, there's going to be deception. 1.63 million results. I mean, stop and think about it. These are web pages that are hitting on these keywords in that sequence. And yet people still say, well, if it was that big, the government would have to tell us about it because it would be that big.
Yeah, and if you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn that's for sale. It's going cheap. It's going quick. To you, whoever wants to buy it, $300 million. You can put a toll booth on it, and we're good to go. You can make your money back in a year. I promise you. There's a lot of traffic that goes across that bridge.
And you know, it's what I'm seeing is you know, is just part and part of the suppression. What makes the suppression really so effective is that people really do tend to cling to the bliss of their ignorance, like jealous lovers. They do not want to, they don't want the news. But there's a growing minority of them that do, and that are waking up to it. And so that for me was the key issue here to creating the Planet X 101 series, which is about 3 hours of video and capped off with pole shift, which gets into a look at, you know, what would the celestial mechanics be in terms of the causality of a pole shift. And, you know, after you've watched this for 3 hours, you're going to see a lot of hard evidence. You're going to see a lot of observations. You're going to see a lot of science. You're also going to see other things. You're going to see prophecy, predictions. It pulls all of the interest angles in there. But at the end of it, if you've gone through the whole 4 episodes in the series,